Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this live webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eleanor Lee, Product Marketing Manager at Security Compass, and your host for today's webinar. Before we get started with the actual content, I'd like to give you a quick overview of Security Compass. If you could just flip to the next slide, thank you very much. For those of you who may not be aware of us until today, Security Compass was founded in 2004 and began with a team of experienced penetration testers. Today, we work with many large enterprises globally to accelerate their time to market for software development as they shift to DevSecOps. We have three key offerings. Our flagship product, SC Elements, enables organizations to deliver software quickly and reduce costs through automation. Our modular role-based e-learning solutions empower organizations to embrace DevSecOps. And our strategic advisory services offer expertise in cloud security, pen testing, and red teaming. Let's quickly go through some housekeeping items. As you might notice, you have all entered this session on mute to reduce background noise. A recording of this webinar will be available after today's event. You will receive an email with a link to the recording, and we will also publish the recording in the resources section of our website. So just keep an eye on that. Also, we encourage everyone to raise questions. So please submit your questions into the chat box or into the Q&A box, and we'll address them during the Q&A session. And lastly, if you would like to follow up with us, or if you have a topic you would like to see covered in the future webinar, please email us at contact@securitycompass.com. So for today's webinar, been very looking forward to this day. We're going to take a close look at engaging developers to scale threat modeling. I am very pleased to have here with me Pranoy Dey, software developer turned security advocate at Security Compass. Pranoy has significant developer experience, and he engages with security practitioners and decision makers in proactively embedding security in their software development process. He is also an active voice in the DevSecOps community. Pranoy, thank you so much for being here with me today. I know our audience is very keen to see your presentation, so I will let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I take a lot of learnings from my previous life as a developer, coupled with a more hands-on security role that I have right now. And having been part of both camps, I feel like there are certain fundamental changes that an organization can make to better utilize the resources they have and extract maximum throughput. The approach in this webinar will focus on unlocking the immense hidden potential that is sitting within your development teams, and then direct that towards a greater threat modeling success. Before we begin, however, I'd love to get a sense of the different camps attending this webinar. So maybe look at your screens, and there should be a poll question that pops up, and you can just indicate which departments you belong to. If you are part of a compliance team or just someone generally looking, or your team is not included, just hit the other option. Eleanor, can we have the results, or are people still voting?
I think people are still voting, so let's give them a few more seconds. All right, I think 81% voted. Shall we see the results?
Yeah, let's see what we have. Oh, we have a majority of security folks, a few in development, few in product management, IT, and other. Okay, fantastic. That's a good distribution, I would say. Okay, then let's get started. Quick look at the agenda. We'll start off by talking about the ideal state. Now, organizations by and large are not threat modeling as much as they would like to. The dream state where organizations, or what organizations are working towards, largely remains undefined in a lot of places. We want to sort of lock down on a specific goal that applies to most companies, and then define a strategy that sort of helps us make that journey. Now, for that journey, the most important teams that are well positioned to help you achieve those goals, to get you to the ideal state, are your security and development teams. So we want to sort of take a look at how these teams perceive the problem of threat modeling, what their goals and motivations and challenges are, and how all of that aligns with the organization itself. Once we have that context, we can talk about a different approach, an approach that helps you make that journey, as I'm talking about, getting you to that ideal state, unblocking some key critical issues that exist today, and define what that solution is going to be. And then finally, we'll end with summary and some Q&A at the end. Okay. So quick poll again. Why does your organization perform threat modeling? We're going to follow the same exercise. You should be seeing an option that pops up. And keep in mind that there's no right answer here. You could pick one or even multiple. And just get a sense of what the different motivations are for organizations to perform threat modeling. And we'll wait a couple of seconds.
Okay, I think we're ready to share the results.
Okay, let's have a look.
It's still, sorry, it was still moving. Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Okay. Oh, okay, that's fantastic. So like I said, there's no real right answer here. But for the purpose of this webinar, and from my personal experience as well, the answer that I feel is most important, and I see that from 68% of our voters as well, is option B. And the reason I say that is so the option is to understand system deficiencies from an attacker's perspective and then build corresponding defenses. And it really is the second half of this sentence where you're building corresponding defenses that I feel is so important and crucial to successfully execute any threat modeling program. There are lots of threat modeling practices that sort of spend a lot of time up front on identifying your threats, cataloging them across different attack vectors and doing all that work. But if you're not able to translate that into actually implementing your countermeasures, the real benefit of threat modeling is not achieved. Either way, no matter what the reason your company is performing threat modeling, they still happen to face a common problem, or at least most people happen to face this common problem. Companies are not threat modeling enough. We've done some research, in the market, and even based on most of the clients that I've talked to, countless Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, and we've seen that on average, we see about a 10 to 30% coverage in threat modeling across their entire application portfolio, 10 to 30%. That leaves almost 70% in your best case scenario exposed and not threat modeled. Right? Exposing the organization to significant risk. Some of the reasons why you have such a small percentage of coverage, they're pretty intuitive reasons. Firstly, security itself is a very skilled profession. There's a shortage of talented security people, and that's one of the top reasons that you see, you go to any CISO in any company and ask them, would you like to hire more security folks? And they'll say, yeah, absolutely. Please get me some. Where can I find them? The talent pool is so limited and there's a lot of competition across companies to sort of bid for them. Secondly, threat modeling as it is today is no short exercise. Cataloging your threats, identifying appropriate controls, these can take weeks. Drawing your architecture diagrams, generating your attack trees, your data flow diagrams require days of discussion sometimes. And this investment in in-depth analysis often comes at the cost of organizations just accepting that because it's so time consuming, I'm only going to threat model my most important applications, or like, as we like to call them, your crown jewels, which really leaves the rest of your portfolio exposed. So the goal that we want to talk about, or the ideal state, we're sort of keeping it very generic, right? Organizations on a high level, they want to be able to reduce the total risk exposure for the organization. Now, there are countless different ways that you could reduce your overall risk for the organization. But the strategy that we want to focus on for this webinar is going to be to increase your threat modeling coverage across the entire application portfolio. Keep in mind that's at 70% right now. That's not being threat modeled. Is there a way that we can extend our threat modeling easily across to those applications, almost with the resources we already have, without any significant changes to strategy? How can we increase that coverage? And that's what we want to focus on for this webinar. Okay, so let's look at how the different teams are sort of perceiving this problem. And we'll start off with the organization itself. What are the organization goals that we want to achieve? We want to reduce our overall risk, that, as we've established, is our primary goal. Companies, want to comply with relevant standards. This one's important. You can imagine most of the companies right now, they suddenly get a mandate. There's a new version of GDPR that's out. You're working in the health industry. You have new standards in HIPAA. You have to get compliant with PCI if you're dealing with credit card. A lot of it is required by law even. So companies have goals of getting compliant with these different regulations. Finally, they also want to be able to manage their costs. Security is expensive. Security folks are expensive. So reducing their cost per application allows them to have a larger coverage. Some of the motivations real quickly that organizations have, they want to protect themselves from legal consequences. If you're required by law to be compliant with GDPR and there happens to be a breach, the fines could rack up to millions. I know I specifically know laws in Singapore right now. If you're not compliant and there happens to be a breach, the fines are significant. So companies want to make sure that they save themselves from legal consequences. At the end of the day, organizations are still there to make money. They have to provide a service to customers, and that's the business they're in. So even though security is very important, they want to make sure that they can maintain their competitive advantage. They're able to release product. So reducing time to market is a key motivation factor. Faster release cycles. How can we do this? And finally, protecting your brand and reputation. We've seen countless breaches happen over the last few years, high-profile ones even. And no matter who the cause is for that breach, so imagine you have a company that has a massive breach and the source of the breach was at no fault of the company's, right? And maybe it was a vendor, a third-party library that lied about its security features or something of that sort. It is the company ultimately that suffers. So companies are motivated to make sure that their brand is protected. They don't have any legal consequences and they're able to constantly release their product. And the challenges they face, generating meaningful security metrics. This is a big one for any organization. How are they really able to tell themselves that we're on the right track with security? When a practitioner comes and says, you release this product and that's a 67% risk. What does that really mean? How are they tracking these things? How does that really translate to actions that the organization has to do? Add to that, there's already a difficulty in hiring and retaining top security talent. And finally, this one's very personal to me. The communication gap between your security engineering and compliance teams. I'm a strong advocate of DevSecOps, and I feel to successfully execute any security program, DevSecOps is a key component. And so, for instance, if I want to get compliant, I keep bringing up GDPR because that's the most well-known regulation. If I want to get compliant with GDPR, I want to find out how each policy line in the document translates to the security vulnerabilities. Then I want to also find out how each vulnerability translates to the different dev tasks. I then want to cross-reference all that information and tell me, okay, I am 80% through getting compliant with GDPR. This communication is often a massive challenge for organizations. How are these different teams communicating with each other? Okay, so before we move on, just a quick recap of the goals, because this is important, right? Organizations want to reduce overall risk. They want to comply with the relevant standards, and they want to reduce the security cost. The two most important teams that are positioned to help you achieve these goals, how are they then perceiving the same problem? Let's start off with the security. Look at their goals, motivations, and challenges. And straight off the bat, security, as a practitioner, my goals would be, I want to have more accurate threat modeling outcomes. I want high quality threat models. I want to be able to scale that across all applications. I want to reduce my vulnerabilities in an application. I want to successfully identify all my remediation controls, right? Looking at their motivations then, I want to adhere to my organizational mandate. If the organization is telling me, this is what I expect from you, that is, I'm motivated to make sure that I am compliant with that. As a talented professional in a highly skilled job, I want to minimize my non-repetitive work. I want to stay engaged. You look at any professional in a skilled job, they would probably jump ship real quick when the job gets redundant, when the job gets boring. And that is the fear that organizations have. If you're forcing your talented folks to sit down and do highly manual labor and highly manual work, and which gets repetitive, they don't stay engaged anymore. They want to focus on other areas of threat management. There's threat intelligence, there's security analytics, hunting, campaign tracking, incident response even. They want to focus their time and effort on some of these other areas, but they don't have the time to because threat modeling takes so long. Some of the challenges they have, development teams are significantly larger than security teams. One practitioner almost has to cater to 200, 300 developers at times. They're already dealing with a lack of budget. They have to stay up to date with the latest security content. It's a rapidly changing landscape. GDPR coming out with new versions, HIPAA coming out with new versions, SOC 2 with new cloud, the new cloud requirements that have come out. They have to constantly stay up to date with every new release. And then communicating and tracking progress with engineering teams. There's no real good best practice to do these things. And these are often challenges that you'll see. But by and large, what's important to notice from this slide is the goals of the security team, the overall agenda is very much aligned with the organization. So if the organization has a security focus, the security team, obviously, by extension, is aligned with that. What is important now is the other team that is crucial to achieving your success, which is your development teams, right? So security aligned, very good. How is development then now perceiving this problem? What are the goals of a developer? And I relate to this very much myself, having been a developer for more than 7 years of my life. I see, as a developer, I want to release on time. That's my primary goal. I'm hired by the business to build a product that's going to make the company money. I want to make sure that I'm releasing on time. My sprints are meeting the required ticket deadlines. I am basically following all my development processes within my agile system. And I'm able to give a decent throughput to my company. Personally, I want to be able to write clean and maintainable code so we can extend our systems easily. And finally, I want to meet the minimum security acceptance criteria. Because that is required, I want to go and meet the acceptance criteria. But that's it. I am motivated as a developer to optimize my time for building interesting and technically challenging features. As a developer, I remember even when I had to go and do support work, it was like, okay, this seems like it's not as much fun as building one of the latest features which stands at the edge of technology. And I'm doing some new research using the latest libraries, the latest standards. All of that is so much more exciting. So I want to optimize my time for building interesting projects. I want to exercise maximum possible automation. I want to stay agile. I want to move fast. And I want to ease my friction with security. I don't really want security telling me, hey, man, you can't release right now. By the way, you haven't completed all these security tasks. So that's what I'm motivated by as a developer. Some of the challenges, you face with respect to security, inadequate guidance, that's a big one. Someone just throws the GDPR handbook to a developer and says, okay, can you make sure that everything here is completed? I don't really know how to do that translation. I already have tight deadlines for my feature work. How am I prioritizing all my security work that's handed over to me along with tight feature deadlines that I already have? How am I going to fit security into my fast moving agile processes? So these are general challenges. And just again, taking a step back, we see that development is not directly aligned with the security needs. And that makes sense, right? Development is not hired just for security. They have other responsibilities. But looking at the bigger picture and how important the development, and when I say development, I really mean development and DevOps, how important these teams are in executing, and they're not really aligned when it comes to the security strategy as much. And that's where the problem lies, right? So what we have identified is an opportunity here where a small change in our mindset and responsibilities can unlock great potential, leading to much higher threat modeling success. Now, amalgamating all this information, let's look at a few key considerations we want to make. We identified that we have developer wealth, which means we have a large number of developers. We also have a shortage in skilled security folks. Add to that, developers don't really have an active voice in your security planning process for your threat modeling. They're really looked at more as execution machines almost. Companies ideally would like to have a much higher throughput with the resources they already have. Without needing to have significant expansion plans, they want to just increase the amount they're able to do. So this is sort of what we want to take and consider moving from our current to ideal state where we have a different approach. Okay, so the Pareto principle states that for many events, or for most events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. Now let's go back to the beginning where we said almost 70% of your portfolio remains exposed and doesn't get threat modeled. So imagine now we had an approach through automation where we could apply minimum effort on those applications and extract maximum benefit. We can straight away vastly increase our entire threat modeling coverage because across all those 70% of applications, we're just going to apply a bit of effort and we're going to get maximum coverage or get huge benefits for that effort. And that's the approach that we're suggesting. So the automated threat modeling approach, what is this approach about? This is an approach that is going to focus on prioritizing your agility, your scalability, and most importantly, your actionability. From an agile perspective, what we are proposing is making your developers partake in threat modeling as a self-serve activity. Developers start by initiating the process, and they also are the ones executing on the process. Given the fact that it's going to be highly automated, threat modeling then can start applying across your entire portfolio, making it significantly more scalable. It's not just reserved for your crown jewels anymore. All your applications can get threat modeled. And most importantly, going back again to our definition of why we perform threat modeling, which is to understand system deficiencies and build those corresponding defenses, we want this approach to focus on action. So beyond just identifying your threats, the approach is going to really give developers with solid, actionable guidance on what they need to do to actually implement these countermeasures. We want to automatically identify your common threats and assign actionable tasks to mitigate them. We elevate the role of a developer in proactively identifying these threats. That allows us to quickly perform threat models across all our applications. Anytime a developer has a new release, they have a new application they want to start, they quickly kickstart the process themselves. They know exactly what security work has to be done, and it's all embedded inside their agile processes. So how does this work? This approach that might sound too good to be true, how does this actually look into your workflow? Now imagine you have an automation platform. For any threat modeling activity, this is sort of a standard workflow where you describe your project. This could be through a data flow diagram or anything else. You then have to analyze your threats, you generate your requirements, you have to implement and track them. So how does this work within an automation platform? We'll start off by the description. Now imagine you have a survey, right, a questionnaire that developers can start answering every time they want to start off a new project or a new release. They answer deep technical questions about the stack. So what application am I building? Is it a web app? Is it a mobile app? Is it a web service, an API? Is it a microservice? Is it an infrastructure service? So they give deep technical information. They can add on to it any compliance needs. Do I want to be compliant with GDPR here? Do I want to be compliant with SOC 2, with NIST 800, with ISO 27101? So you give all this information upfront in the form of a questionnaire. The system then analyzes this question, these answers, and generates for you a set of threats and countermeasures. Now you notice anything in orange here is automated for you, right? So you describe it manually, and then you get generated for you a set of countermeasures directly relevant to your project. We then take all those countermeasures and sort of sync it straight into the workflow of developers. So if your developers are using issue trackers and like Jira or Rally, and that's where they're comfortable working, we will generate actionable dev tickets straight into those workflows. Developers can then consume the content and then implement the code with all the necessary guidance already available inside those tickets. Finally, the automation platform will maintain a live sync with the issue tracker, and you can constantly see how many tickets are done, not done. You have that aggregated information within the system, making it sort of a source of truth. And then once you've completed all the necessary tickets, you repeat the process with the next release. So you have a differential of, okay, I'm adding a new feature. What are the new tasks I have to do? And you follow the same process again. Now, if I want to take a deeper dive between, you might have questions. How are these automatic risks, or how are these countermeasures getting generated by the platform? And this is sort of how the concept works, right? Once you've given all the answers inside the questionnaire, the database of the platform will sort of contain these mappings of all the answers to the different threats. So if I'm building, if I'm using Java and I'm building a Java app, I can map that to specific threats associated with Java applications. So I have all my answers mapped to the different threats. And then I have all my threats mapped to whatever countermeasures have to be put in place to mitigate against it. Using these mappings, then, once you've entered all your answers, you can generate a set of countermeasures that your developers have to do. So, when you're engaging with any type of subject matter expert, whether it's a lawyer, whether an accountant, in this case, maybe a security architect, every process is more or less similar. Looks something like this. The expert starts off by gathering information about your situation. They use their personal judgment to assess the information you provide. They provide recommendations, and in the end, they'll give you reports to validate your approach as well. This is why professionals like this are so vital to an organization, and there never seems to be enough of them. So I sort of want to apply this approach and see how it compares with the traditional approach versus ours. Now, imagine with a traditional approach, you're doing something like STRIDE, or which is probably one of the most common ways to threat model. How are we gathering information? For a traditional approach, we'd be drawing our diagrams and doing whiteboarding. This could take hours, maybe in some cases a couple of days even, right? As opposed to that, in the automated approach, you have this questionnaire that developers have to go in and fill out, and that can be done in 30 to 60 minutes tops. Then comes the time for expert assessment. And this is where things get deep, right? Your practitioners have to really analyze all the input, generate the attack trees, draw your diagrams and do all that work, which is deeply manual and very time consuming, often taking anywhere from days to weeks. As opposed to that, the automated approach will identify these threats instantly, given the automation platform that we have. Similarly, with the recommendations, the traditional approach would require your practitioners to analyze all the threats and then describe each countermeasure applicable to each threat, which again is instant. It could take days to weeks for a practitioner, but instant with the automation approach. And finally, when it comes to validation and reporting, this is often not even in scope with the traditional approach. But imagine you have a system that has all this data. You already have what are the threats applicable. You have what countermeasures have been suggested, how many of them have been completed, and all of this is in a database, making it searchable. Just makes it all that much easier for auditing, reporting, and validation purposes. So really giving you so much more benefit for that initial investment of just answering the survey. So what are some of these key benefits then of automated threat modeling? Security teams can focus on various other aspects of threat management besides threat modeling. Their time is freed up. They can focus on incident response. They can focus on hunting. They can focus on campaign management, security analytics, threat intelligence. These are exciting things to do quite often. They're open-ended. They force security folks to think, and it's exciting. They would stay engaged doing these activities because they have more time. For any applications as well, for your absolute most important applications, if you want to do a deeper dive of threat modeling on top, you have the time to do that now, and leaving the rest of your applications to be taken care of with the automated approach. Now, moving forward to developers, developers will have an active role in threat modeling. They are going to be the team that's initiating it almost, right? So they have an active voice. They understand the needs. They understand how to prioritize, really enabling your DevSecOps within the organization. And finally, for the company at large, you can do so much more with the resources you already have. Now, all of this that I've talked about today, it sort of might sound too good to be true, maybe even futuristic for that matter. But, as a matter of fact, there are a few different products out there that are built on this exact principle. One of those is an offering of Security Compass. It's called ST Elements, and is a scalable threat modeling solution that allows you to do everything that I've just mentioned. It's a developer-friendly self-serve activity where you get all the benefits that I've talked about. It's automated. It sort of fits into your system. It can be fit into an agile system. All the tickets that get generated get pushed to the backlog, works with developer sprints, all of that. Gives you extensive coverage, helps you mitigate your overall risk. We'd love to show you how we've been able to help countless Fortune 500 companies significantly reduce their risk by extending their threat modeling. Okay, so just to summarize real quick again, the manual approach, we've seen how it prevents organizations from being able to threat model at scale. And what we're suggesting is through automation in key areas, you can extend that coverage across your entire portfolio, reduce your overall risk. With this agile approach, your release timelines don't get impacted, and you're able to leverage that hidden potential sitting within your large development teams, getting them engaged into the process, really utilizing those resources to maximize your threat modeling output. Again, think the 80-20 rule. I guess we can open it up for Q&A if there are any at this moment.
So actually we did receive, I really want to thank the audience for being so engaged. We received a few questions earlier during the presentation, so why don't we start with those?
Okay.
First question is, my company sees threat modeling as a paper exercise as opposed to the automated scanning where they see actual value in identifying risks. What do you suggest to change this type of mindset? It's a really good question.
That is a very good question. So honestly, this is what we've seen in a lot of organizations. The hardest part of introducing new processes is changing mindset. The best we can do is, start off by really identifying the business value of doing something like this. If you go and you're able to talk high enough, if the messaging can reach a high enough department, as a security practitioner, I might not see enough value in changing the way I'm threat modeling right now because I'm used to doing things a certain way. If I talk just to a developer as well, developers will say, wait, you're asking me to do more work? How is this helping me? But if you're able to speak high enough and you're able to show that, okay, this is a problem that the organization is facing, and by making this shift, there's overall value to be had, overall risk gets reduced. If you're able to get that message high enough, you can start making that change in mindset.
Great. Totally agree with that. We have another great question. So how do you scale threat modeling for large software systems? So it's a scale of, in the scale of 10 to 100 million lines of code across dozens of teams. What approach do you recommend? For example, do you produce hierarchies of threat models that decompose high-level threats to lower-level components, or is there a different approach?
Right. So, this approach that I talked about today is actually best suited for situations like that. There are different components to how you can start threat modeling. Now, there's also, you start off by first identifying your critical assets, right? Which ones are critical, which ones are high importance, which ones are medium, which ones are not as important. Once you have that hierarchy, the best thing about this approach is threat modeling becomes a self-serve activity for those individual teams, no matter how big the project is, or how large your code base is, or how many teams they have. A developer or a development team working on a set of applications are sort of initiating their own threat modeling. So they can start off, they can kickstart their own projects, they have their own Jira boards, their tickets relevant to their projects are synced only to their boards. So from a segregated perspective, each individual team is sort of dealing with their own threat modeling. From the organization's perspective, if you have the most critical applications and you want to focus on a more manual approach on those, you can do that. But development teams then become self-sufficient to start protecting or guarding their applications within themselves. And that's the real benefit of having an approach like this.
Thank you. And our last question I think that we could address is, here's a third one. Diagramming approach in threat modeling helps describe a system better than anything else. So without that, how can one ensure that all threats have been captured?
Right. So this is sort of, this is a question that I've received countless times from different security practitioners. Absolutely, doing your data flow diagrams has certain benefits. The in-depth analysis or the detail associated with description of an asset in that form is great. But we have seen the trade-off there. With that depth, you don't get the coverage. What we're suggesting is a blended approach where you want to focus that much time on a single application, make sure you're doing it for your most important application only. But there are hundreds and thousands of other applications where you apply an approach like the one I described today, and then you can get instant coverage. Add to that, a system like ST Elements, I can speak for that personally, has a coverage of almost 92% of all vulnerabilities out there. So for a fraction of the effort, you get a 92% coverage for all your threats. And that's something you can then use to increase that coverage across all those other applications that are not being threat modeled right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Pranoy, for a very insightful presentation. For the next one, we highly recommend a white paper that we have on in our resources section of our website. It's about shifting towards scalable threat modeling, and it talks about those principles and a blended approach to identifying and mitigating different types of risks, of threats. So something that you could do for some follow-up learning. And also we have webinars lined up for over the next few weeks. Please visit our website to sign up for these webinars. And thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you got some great practical takeaways from this presentation. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. Again, we will provide a link to the recording after this webinar, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay well and safe.